Hello everyone, this is Leo from the Monkeys Making Misplays, and now that Divine Z's first set, Fated Clash, is officially released, we wanted to start doing set reviews to help both new and old players understand what is in each set. We will be doing one nation per video to better spread out the cards and not end up with an hour-long video. We will be providing timestamps for each of the 5 categories we've divided the cards into, which may change depending on the set, but for now those categories are New Ride Lines, Quick Start Deck Support, which will change to Divine Z Support after this set, Overdress Support, which is support for any of the ride lines from Overdress, Generic Support, and then finally we have Reprints and Promos. Alright, whether you are starting with this part or just joined us from finishing the Dragon Empire deck, let's discuss the cards in Keter Sanctuary. This nation also received a Divine Skill user like both Blanket and Dragon Empire did, and the new ride line for this nation is the main unit for the protagonist from Divine Z, and that is the Fated One of Miracles, Raziel. This deck receives a total of 7 cards, again not including the starter, as it's not key for the deck, you know, you could literally play any Keter starter, so not relevant here. But let's start with the ride line like we've done before. The grade 1 Ventesta is an exact nation swap of the grade 1 for Varga. It gains plus 2k on if your Vanguard is Raziel, and when it's run upon by a Sensior, which is the grade 2, you call it to rearguard Soul Charge 1. Bushi really said, why shouldn't I just put the same card in both of the main decks? Nonetheless, it's a fine fact with it being able to replace itself in Soul, give you an attacker or a booster, similar to Varga. You know, we talked about that card then, so this card's going to be the same. The grade 2 from the ride line is not quite as good as Varga's, and that is a Sensior who only has one ability, and it triggers when he is run upon by Raziel. You can choose up to one grade 2 or less card from drop and call it to rearguard. You could say that the end result is the same, with you just getting another unit for free, but a Sensior doesn't have any rearguard abilities, so unlike Boulder Axe, he doesn't serve any other purpose besides just being in the ride line. You know, Boulder Axe is going to see play in probably the main deck of Varga for quite a while because it's just a free draw. Now let's talk about Raziel. A simple effect, but it's good because of its simplicity. So when Raziel attacks the Vanguard, you can counterblast 1 to choose up to 2 cards from drop with different grades and a total of grade less than or equal to your damage and call them to rearguard. So if you're at 5 damage, you can call it grade 3 and a grade 2, and you get a total of 5 attacks. The strength of this effect is the ability that you're able to play pretty much anything you want and have constant recursion of pretty much all of your units, right? You can play, it is not specific to any sort of archetype. It's not like Direful Dolls that are tied to their own cards, or like the Welstra cards where they're all asking for Welstra. Sure, there are some cards that care about your Vanguard being Raziel, but Raziel doesn't care about anything specific, you know. But we have his Divine Skill to talk about, which for a Soul Blast 1 lets you return all the crits from your drop to deck, and then he gains a drive. That's just the drive for 1 turn, so he doesn't get to keep the drive, but you do get a turn of triple drive. But there is more. If it was just that, it'd be pretty tame, right? He gives you a one-time ability that allows you to count a trigger other than a heal as a heal and recover a point of damage if it is your 6 damage. Which means you have a higher chance of surviving because now you filled your deck with triggers again, and instead of only 5 cards being able to save you, there's 16, right? So now technically if you were to hit the over trigger defensively as your 6 damage, it would remove itself from the game and also heal you down to 4, which I think is pretty crazy. But you know, that's one of those things where it's like, hey, it's a one of 16, you know, it's gonna happen to someone somewhere probably, but you're not gonna see it that often. Right, I think this is another really good deck. I think Varga definitely is a better deck, but I think Raziel himself has also got an incredibly good foundation. I mean, this Raziel is so good. I mean, it's generic. It lets you put triggers back into the deck. It gives you some added protection. There's just a lot here for players to just grasp onto. I think that's good for someone that is probably going to be the, how do I say it, the unit that people are gonna get attached to if they start watching Divine Z, right? Because Raziel comes out in a lot of the episodes because, you know, he's the main Vanguard, or the main guy's Vanguard, right? But let's look at his support cards. You know, again, we've got a completely original effect, never before seen, with Guardian that gains plus 5k power and shield if your Vanguard is Raziel. This is literally an exact copy of Kofu from Varga. They really leaned in on these 2 decks by making the cards almost identical. Even in some of the other support that we'll see, you'll see some similarities. Like this next one, which is a grade 1 Aerial Sage, who just like Impale Horn Dragon gains plus 5k when it boosts if you have a Raziel Vanguard. Then when it boosts a Raziel Vanguard, you can discard a card from hand to countercharge 1 and have a gain plus 2k. So it becomes a 15k booster just like Impel Horn. Obviously the effects aren't 1-for-1, but you can clearly see the bases are the same. I don't think that's a bad thing per se, but you know, they maybe should have done a little bit more to differentiate these two guys, right? I don't think you want people to think, oh, Keter Sanctuary and Dragon Empire are the exact same, right? I think you should differentiate them maybe a bit more, maybe not make them look so similar. But we have another 2 cards. Now we have the grade 2 Nobia that allows you to counterblast one when she's placed on rear and your Vanguard is Raziel to look at the top 3 cards of your deck for a grade 3 or less card and call it to rear guard. But if it is during the battle phase, then you can add the card to your hand instead of calling it. Some nice filter rate, and if you use it during the battle phase, then it'll just lets you dig for a PG or some other unit. And then Nobia's second ability lets you Soul Blast one when it attacks a grade 3 or greater Vanguard to have her gain plus 10k. Just some nice power, and it'll help you hit your opponent's Vanguard without needing a booster, right? Which you're probably going to save your boosters for when after Raziel attacks, you'll superior call from drop, so you'll want bigger attacks on your second swing. And then we have one more support unit for Raziel, and it's the grade 3 Gigantic Masher, excuse me. This unit has a pretty simple effect. It grants it plus 15k when it's placed on rear guard by the ability of Raziel, so we got a 28k attacker, which is cool. But, you know, I don't know if this beats out being able to call just some stronger cards. You know, you could look at the set 10 cyclers. You could look at the cycler from this set that we're going to talk about later. Both of those cards are just really good. So I don't know if just power is going to be enough. But I honestly think the real power or the real strength behind the Raziel deck is its ability to play anything, right? If there's any Keter Sanctuary deck that doesn't, you know, lock itself to an archetype, Raziel can play it. So you're looking at things like Sages from the Festival Collection, you're looking at Spiral Cutie, you're looking at the Cyclers, you're looking at the grade 1 cycle from this set as well, you're looking at the Toll Pass, you know, all these generic cards that sure all the other decks can play, but you know, this guy gets access to any of them, and it's not locked behind needing to have any other things, right? It doesn't need to have something else to make it work. You know, it's just a generic, you know, my cards, you can play them, but you could play literally anything else and I'll be doing just as well. But let's now shift gears from the new ride lines and move over to the quick start deck support. And that's where we move Angels from Raziel to Saravsel. Dude, I butcher these names every time. But he received a total of 3 cards in this set, of which, you know, 2 are just the ride line with the effects that the quick start deck didn't receive. But for the grade 1, we've got Caring Sage, who when wrote upon by Swithhelm, which is the grade 2, we'll talk about later, lets you reveal the top card of your deck and call it to rear guard if it's a grade 2 or less normal unit. If you don't call a card, you get it to add it to your hand, but then you get a discard. And then he's got the same effect where he gains plus 5k if your Vanguard is the quick start deck boss that he corresponds to, which for him is, I'm not going to try and say that angel name again. It's so weird. You know, let's just move on to the grade 2 Swithhelm. That when wrote upon by Saravsel, lets you choose a grade 3 or less card from hand, call it to rear guard. If you call a card, you draw a card. Same thing, he also gains plus 10k shield if your Vanguard is Saravsel, which is identical to all the other grade 2 from the quick start deck. I think this red line's okay. I wish you didn't have to discard when you added the card with Caring Sage, but I guess they think that's too crazy because, I mean, you just get to call a card and then draw a card with the second one, and I don't know, I feel like they're very similar effects. And then the last card for Saravsel is the backup grade 3, which, in my opinion, you know, you can disagree with me, I think he is the best of the backup grade 3s, right? And that's because both abilities are really good. The first one lets you counterblast one to check top 5 and call a grade 3 or less to rear guard when he is placed on rear guard circle from hand other than during the battle phase. So he can help you make a board, which, you know, you're going to want to do. And with no other real CB usage besides, you know, the generic quick start deck boss CB1 to get a copy from deck, you should be able to use this ability, you know, at least once a turn, right? That's pretty much all you're going to want it for. But then we have to talk about his second ability, right? So when he attacks, you can Soul Blast one to have him gain plus 5k. This is a pretty standard effect. We've seen this on quite a few of the backup grade 3s. But if you Soul Blast a Saravsel, you can also counter charge 1, always good, or energy charge 3, which means this deck is more able to play energy cards because you can get double energy every turn. Being able to get at least 6 energy every turn means you aren't as restricted on playing the new cards. That is one of the biggest downsides to the quick start decks, that they have to kind of save their energy and they can't play any of the other energy cards because they have no way of gaining energy. You know, they're gonna have to hold the energy for their boss's activations, right? Because, you know, it costs 4 to activate one of their abilities, you know, and by the time you get to them, if you're going first, you'll only have 6 energy. If you're going second, you'll have 9, which if you're going second, you do get a little bit more wiggle room, but then if you can't finish the game, you're going to run out of that energy pretty quickly, and maybe you'll end up in a situation where you won't have the energy to use your boss, and that's going to be a real feels bad. But that's not going to happen with this deck because you get 6 energy a turn. So even if you're using your Vanguard, you still have 2 left over. So you can use the grade 1s that can counterblast 1, energy blast 2 to draw a card and gain +5, which we're going to talk about later. Personally, I think the Seraph Sail backup grade 3 is the best one. I mentioned it earlier, but I do really think this is a really good card. I think Seraph Sail is one of the better quick start deck bosses. You know, I mean, getting cards from drop, it's literally just like Raziel, so you've got to think that it's pretty good. I mean, it just doesn't have the divine skill. But we're done with that section. Let's move on to the Overdress section, which for Keter Sanctuary was support for a relatively new deck. You know, I thought the support would be mostly for older decks. You know, I mean, we've seen Gravidia, we've seen Eugene, we saw Greedon, right? But the support for this nation was for Alden, who is a relatively new deck. If I remember correctly, he came out in set 12 or 13. I think it was 13. I can't remember right now, but he's a relatively new deck. I didn't expect to see him, but I guess I don't know what other deck they could have given support to. But he did get 1 card in this set, and that card is the grade 1 Persil, who while on back row center rearguard can counterblast 1, put itself into soul to restand the same number of rested rearguards as the number of rearguards placed during the battle phase by your Vanguard with Alden in its card name's ability. If you restand 2 units, you get to draw a card. So the Alden deck has 5 attacks now in just its own support and doesn't need to rely on like outside cards, which I think is pretty good. I think this is a strong card. You're definitely playing this, but I don't think that will make the deck, you know, become a top tier deck. I think it'll make it more consistent, but I do think Alden might need a little bit more help. But if you're interested in playing Alden, this card I believe is a double rare, so it's pretty cheap. You know, get yourself a set. I know you still have to get that promo, grade 0, but you know it's what we got to do in this game. Bushiroad just really loves promos for some reason. But we're done with the Overdress support. Now we're going to talk about the generic support, which for Keter Sanctuary is a total of 9 cards. Again, we'll start with the Cycler, which for Keter Sanctuary is Biscotti, who's similar to the Cyclers from set 10. When it's discarded from hand while riding from the right deck, you can counterblast 1 or energy blast 3 to draw a card. But these have the addition where if you play them on Guardian Circle, you get to activate that ability again. So you kind of get to replace your guard for free, especially if your deck doesn't use energy. The Cyclers, however, don't put themselves in the bottom like the original Cyclers, so you're going to have to find another way. But, I mean, we already saw Seraph Sail and Raziel can both resurrect from drop, so not really going to be the worst thing. And then the on-place ability, obviously just like the original Cyclers, requires you Persona Ride, which means when Biscotti is placed on rearguard, if you've Persona Road, you can either counterblast 1 or energy blast 3 to look at the top 3 cards of your deck, place 1 on the top of the deck, then put the rest on the bottom. If it's not during the battle phase, you can call it to rearguard instead of putting it on top of the deck. These are definitely cards worth picking up, you know, regardless of if your deck is playing it, because the cards are going to get super expensive most likely. I know they're currently pretty expensive, but I don't think I could recommend a set for you to buy into more than Fated Clash. You know, you'll get a lot of stuff that you'll probably need, you know, down the line. But let's move on. The Cycler's good. It's able to stack during the battle phase or call an extra card during the main phase. How can that not be good, right? But now we're going to talk about the grade 1 cycle for this, which for Keter Sanctuary is Forceps Angel. This grade 1 unit can counterblast 1 if you Persona Road to look at the top 3 cards of your deck, call it grade 3 or less to rearguard, and then it gains plus 10k. I think Keter Sanctuary probably received the best grade 2 Cycler and grade 1 Persona Ride unit. Both can call another card and are just easy to proc that it's so crazy. I mean, it requires you Persona Road. It's not really a high bar. You know, both of these cards are really good. Forceps Angel just becomes an 18k booster and lets you call a card from the top. You know, selectively called, not just random. But we have 2 more generic units here. We've got Prosperous Dragon that has a pretty simple effect that just lets you energy blast 4 when it attacks a Vanguard if you have 4 more units to draw a card. Again, if you got no other use for energy, I don't see why you couldn't tech this in to draw some extra cards. Nothing crazy, but it's just an energy outlet for Keter Sanctuary decks. Then we've got Resurgent Dragon that is sort of support for both Seraphsael and Raziel without directly referencing them. You know, it simply will gain plus 10k when placed on rearguard from drop if your Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater unit. So it's a 20k attacker that doesn't cost anything but being called from drop, which is what both of the Keter Sanctuary bosses are doing. I don't know if this is going to be worth it. There's probably other units that just are 20k attackers and are something else. So, I mean, you know, Raziel had that already. Then we've got 2 orders, a Blitz and a normal, just like all the other sets. Starting with the normal order, it lets you Energy Blast 2 to choose 2 units, and they get during the battle this unit is boosted. It gets plus 10k, and then if you have 5 or more units, you get to draw a card. You know, it's pretty good. Keter Sanctuary decks all usually have a full board, so this is a cool way to get some extra power. You know, some card draw. You could maybe play this in something like Bastion to get the power and the draw cards there. I mean, I know Bastion already plays its own order, so it might be a little rough there. Then we have the Blitz order, which is a Energy Blast 2 to look at the top card of your deck, call it to Guardian Circle, or put it on the bottom of the deck. If you call a card, the called unit gets plus 10k shield until end of turn. This is a cool way to get some extra shield, or maybe just guarantee some defenses, which I think is going to be funny to try. You know, you just get to look at the top, and if you see something is good, you might just leave it there and go, hey, I'm not going to call anything to Guardian Circle. I'll just let this hit, because you saw maybe a draw trigger or a heal trigger, and you know that you're healing, so why not? You know, if your deck's not playing energy, I think this is a cool option to talk about. Now, we've got the 3 cards that, you know, we've been talking about in every one of these. It's the 3 ones from the Quick Start deck that just got a reprint, but are the same across pretty much all the nations. Starting with Sia, which is the grade 1 that when it boosts, if you have 4 or more units, you can counter blast 1, energy blast 2 to draw a card, and it gains plus 5k. Again, it's going to be the same across all the other versions, except, you know, with the condition changing. So for this one, you have to have 4 or more units because it's a Keter Sanctuary card, so it's asking you to have a lot of units on board. Then we've got the grade 1 Medical Shot Angel, which when discarded from hand during the right phase, you can call it to rearguard as rest. Same effect across all the other Quick Start decks. Play it if you really like that effect, or maybe if you can't afford the cyclers, which is a totally understandable thing. Last card is the grade 2 Tolerance Swing. That's same thing. When it's Soul Blast 2, when it's discarded from hand during the right phase, you can Soul Blast 2 to draw a card. Identical. Cyclers are too expensive. You could try something like this to just kind of get yourself something similar feeling to those cards. With that, we are done with this generic section. We are now going to move on to reprints and promos. In this section, we've got a total of 3 cards, 2 reprints, 1 promos, which is going to be pretty much the same across all of them. I don't think any nation received more than a single promo, so these are going to be all the same. But the first reprint is the Overtrigger. You know, Keter Overtrigger I don't think is that great. A lot of the Keter Sanctuary decks don't play it, just because drive checks on rearguard is pretty cool, but sometimes it's just, you know, you end up using it after you've swung with the rearguard, so you've only got a grade 2 on board, so it just doesn't feel as good, right? So a lot of people will play something like blue OT or red OT in their decks over it, but you know, it's always good to reprint these cards. You know, you don't know when a deck might come that might really like it. Second reprint are the new PGs, which I know sounds dumb, me saying new and then saying reprint, because those words aren't supposed to be together. The PGs are just different art for cards we already have. They just got different art, different names, but literally copy paste of cards. Over triggers and perfect arts being reprinted will never be a bad thing, so you know, we're just gonna, you know, take these where we can. You know, that's why I think Fated Clash is such a good set to go into. You've got over triggers, you've got perfect guards, you've got a bunch of generic units. I mean, you saw there was like 9 cards in there, so that's pretty good. You know, I think the Raziel stuff is really good. Cyclers, all that stuff is really good. But let's talk about the promo that I think probably everyone who plays Keter Sanctuary was waiting for, and that's Sergaon. It's a dog, which, you know, a lot of people have been waiting for. I was really hoping that card wasn't put in this set, because I thought that would just be a lot of stuff from one set, but it is in this set. So let's quickly look at it. You know, so when it boosts, if you have more rear guards than your opponent, or you played an normal order, it gains plus 5k, and at the end of battle, you can retire this unit to look at top 2, choose a card from among them, add it to your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of your deck. If you play Keter Sanctuary, try to get yourself a set of this card as soon as possible, because it is going to almost guarantee become a staple. You know, it's soul, it's selective card selection. You know, it's a 13k booster. The condition for activating is so low. You know, your opponent's probably gonna always have less triggers than you, or you could just play an order and then that's gonna be perfect. I currently only have one of these, and I'm gonna try and get myself the full set eventually, but it's like $20, so I hoping it gets reprinted again, but you know, we can only hope. But with that, we are done with Keter Sanctuary. I think Keter Sanctuary is another really good nation. It got a lot of really good cards. I think it's the best quick start deck support out of all of them because of that grade 3 alone. Razio is maybe the second best deck in the set if I had to really make a selection. I think Razio doesn't beat Varga, but it can win against Varga, which I don't think a lot of other decks can do as easily. But we're done with this nation. Next up, we've got Lyrical Monasterio, and I hope you all join me there so that we can talk about the idols.